Hi. How are you today? Or tonight, depending on where you are. So, this is the third episode of Level Up Your English with Kathleen Ailey. So, welcome. And today we're going to talk about some things that you need to consider that affect your pronunciation. So, we have five things that we want to go over today. And I will try to keep this under a half an hour because either you're in the middle of your day, you're trying to get your lunch, you only have so much time. And, we have a lot of time being taken up, but I want to be able to give you really good stuff in a relatively short amount of time. So let's just get started. So, just a quick thing, I left a note pinned to the chat. Just introduce yourself when you enter. Just introduce yourself and tell me where you're from. And if you'd like to share what your native language is, that will help me out so that I can I've worked with the language myself and I can give you some tips, or I can therefore say, oh, I have someone who speaks this language. Let me look that up. How can I help you with speaking English? How is that different or the same? And that helps me to help you. So just pop it in the chat and let's get to know each other. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is a lot of times, and I've been seeing this particular one a lot lately, because it's really critical if you're ever going to be able to clearly pronounce your words and be understood by native speakers, certainly, but be understood clearly, is that you need to be using the mouth mechanics of English, not your native language, because each language produces its own sounds, and those sounds are produced by whatever you do within your mouth, the shape of your jaw, whether it's longer and more oval, or whether it's wider and horizontal versus vertical, whether your tongue and your jaw and your I'm trying to think of what else, whether your tongue and your jaw are relaxed or whether they're tight and strong and whatever. I'm trying to think of how to explain that, but those all play a major role in how the sounds are formed. Okay, so again, many of you know that I'm learning Korean. I've also I majored in German when I was in university. I've forgotten a lot, most of it, because I just don't use it anymore. And I've learned, I took a trip to Monaco a bunch of years back, and so I learned as much French as I could so that I could talk to people and understand people in their native language, in their native environment, and not force them to speak my language and come out of their natural environment. I was visiting them. I felt it was only right. So I've learned some French, and I've learned some Spanish. I took some Spanish in high school, but actually grammar school and high school. But because of some of the things we're going to go over today, I didn't learn it well. I couldn't speak it well because of one of the examples I'll go over in a second. But the mouth mechanics are important. So as I'm learning Korean, Korean has the opposite approach to creating the sounds that they need versus English. So many of the sounds in Korean, the mouth is horizontal and the tongue is relaxed. And most of the sounds that I know of, they're produced with the tongue flat and sort of spread out, filling the entire bottom of your mouth. Not necessarily glued to the bottom, but really filled out and spread out. And the teeth seem to be more closed. And at first I was just focusing on trying to get even close to the sound. And now, so I was doing more listening, but now I'm watching the formation. What do the people that I see speaking it, how do they position their mouths, and what do they do with their tongues that I can see the best that I can see it. And it's very wide, it's very spread out, it's much more relaxed than with English. English is your tongue is off the floor of your mouth. It's, there's lots of staccato sounds or actions, movements, so for the letter T, your tongue is up here, the tip of your tongue is up here at the back of your teeth. And it's t t t t t, whereas you wouldn't have that necessarily in Korean. There's not a lot of t t t. So it's really important to approach your speaking, your reproduction of the sounds of English with an English mouth mechanics. Okay, and I keep saying that word, and I'm not entirely sure what else to call it, but I keep saying it, but it's just so important. And it's such an area where people get frustrated and they get stuck. And again, I used the example the other day of one of my students who's a Spanish speaker. He hasn't yet gotten into the mindset of, he's combining his Spanish mindset in producing sounds with trying to produce English sounds. So his R's, he's still rolling his R's on the roof of his mouth. So he's having difficulty not only saying words like great and grape and grapple and, gross or whatever the other words are, but it's also slowing him down and tripping him up as he's trying to combine many sounds together. So it's really important that you think with an English mindset as far as how you form your sound. So that's one area that you really have to consider, that's going to affect how you pronounce your words and how clear you're going to be. And if you're not clear, people aren't going to understand you. And if therefore you can't communicate your message, and if you're not communicating your message, you're not fluent. You might have all the mechanics down. You might have all the technical aspects, the grammar. You might know your vocabulary, and you might know in your head how to say them. But if you can't produce the sounds correctly, therefore we call that pronouncing the words, then you're still not fluent, even though you might be proficient. Okay, so remember that. So, and the other part of that, I should remind you, is that so many students of English assume that if I can speak the words fast and not stumble over the words, and if I can say them fast, then I'm fluent because I'm not hesitating. It's not, I don't have to sit there and think, oh my goodness, what was that word? But many times, again, this particular student as well thinks that speaking fast is going to make him fluent, and he doesn't like to stay and work on those fundamentals that are actually going to make him fluent. So not only is he mispronouncing the words because he can't reproduce the sound right, or he's not taking the time to reproduce the sound right, but he's also just going so fast that he skips words, and he just, it's like his mouth can't keep up with his brain as far as what he wants to say or what he's reading. And I find that with many students who want to speak fast because that says to them that they're fluent. So please try to get that out of your head. Just know that even if you're proficient, even if you can pass a written test as far as English, etc., know that there's this other aspect to fluency, and just settle down, relax. The important part here, or a critical part in being fluent, is to be understood. And if you cannot make sure that you're expressing your message in English clearly so that someone can actually understand the words that you're saying, you're not going to be fluent. So settle down, take a break, give yourself a break, and just make sure that you're doing it correctly. The speed will come. The speed will come, just like with anything. When you learn to type, you peck at the keys. You have to do it slowly at first. And then without realizing it, by doing it, by spending the time with it, the speed comes later, okay? But it does come, so just settle down there, okay? So the second one that I wanted to mention is that there's also, again, this has to do with your mouth, is that you might have dental issues. I could say the physiology of your particular mouth can affect it. But it's, might have dental issues. You might have an overbite where your top teeth project out further than average, So that changes the shape of your mouth, and it makes it so that you have to do a little bit of extra work in order to, number one, avoid a lisp or other things like that, and to get the sound properly. It's not impossible, but just if you're struggling, it could be that. Also, if you have an underbite, if I don't know if you can see, but if your bottom jaw juts out, then that changes the shape. And see how I'm talking normally, like I always do, but if my bottom jaw is out of alignment, then that changes how I talk. And a lot of people I notice, they, because of this underbite, they end up with a bit of a lisp, which is not a problem, but we just have to learn to, if you're not able to, get braces or have your dentist take care of that, it's okay. We can work with it, and we can help you to be able to produce it with the mouth that you have. So these are not things to worry about. They're just other areas that can be affecting how you're pronouncing and how clearly you're able to communicate and reproduce the sounds of English. So, and then what was the other one? Yes. So this one, again, people don't think of, and I often forget about it, is allergies and other issues with your sinuses. So English is not a nasal, it doesn't have a lot of nasal sounds. The only sound I can remotely think of would be the like ing, the ing. That's as close as we get to a nasally sound. Other languages are all in the nasal cavity, but English is not one of them. And so if you have, I have many allergies, and so my sinuses are constantly filled no matter what I do with them. So that does affect the sounds that come out of my mouth. And so it is just something to think about. Again, none of these are critical, but if you're aware that, oh, okay, that's my, I've got a cold, my sinuses are, plugged up to, it will affect how you speak and how people understand you. Um, and then the fourth one here is that, and this is one that people don't think of often at all. And actually, excuse me 1 minute. Speaking of cold, this is a bonus one. You could also have strained vocal cords or issues with your vocal cords. I'm finding that I have to get it checked out, but I think I've strained my vocal cords, and that will also affect how you pronounce things. So, but anyway, one thing that many people don't understand, even even native English speakers, there are many people out there who they learned the word incorrectly, or it could be a regional dialect issue. Um, and so if that person who doesn't know that they're pronouncing a word wrong is teaching you the word, then you're going to learn it wrong. So it's important to get many go to many resources. If you're struggling with your pronunciation, or if you're saying a particular word and you're noticing people are reacting funny, look it up and see if, first of all, look it up in your dictionary. Let me just grab mine. They, what is the word? So here, one of my examples is the word ask, A-S-K. And there are many people out there who are native English speakers who say axe. Oh, I have to ask him about that. Axe, that's not how you say it. That is an actual different word, A-X-E, which is a tool. You use an axe to chop wood. So many people get that wrong, and I'm just trying to see. Oops, there it is. No, it doesn't say. It does. This one doesn't show the pronunciation. Oh, sorry. No, it doesn't show the pronunciation. Many of them will show the International Phonetic Alphabet, the pronunciation there. My favorite dictionary doesn't show it. It shows it on some, but not on all. My goodness, I'm devastated. But anyway, you could be learning it wrong because the person that you're learning it from doesn't know that it's not correct. And so it's always good to, I always go to my dictionary if I feel as though I'm struggling with something. I look at the dictionary first. That's just how I learn. I like to see things. I need to see it written down. For example, if some of my students are saying, like, we try to teach each other our languages, and so if they're trying to, if I've asked them, como se dice elephant in Espanol, they will say the word to me, and if I don't understand it, I'll say, can you write that on the whiteboard for me, so that I can match up what I'm hearing and see how it's all written out. That's how I put the whole thing together. So that's the first place I go. But then, of course, YouTube, all over the place, the internet. Look on the internet and just watch many people saying the word, and you'll that will help you to get an understanding of, oh, is this just a regional thing, or is this the actual truth? And again, just everybody, it and it's just sometimes you just learn it wrong, or you have trouble with it. For example, I love this story. When I was learning to cook, I was actually I was learning to bake, and I was 8 years old. But I must have been younger, because I started baking when I was 8, but I was started to learn to cook. I think I was 6. I was just learning to read. And I was making pudding from the box, and because it was easy, and my mother was right there, and I'm stirring, and I was reading the instructions, and it said to stir constantly. So I did, and I was told, we learned what constantly was, and I was stirring, and it was the best boxed pudding I ever made. But then, um, when I was a little older, and so this must have been I was 8, and I saw the word the instruction was to stir occasionally, and I knew that the word was meant the opposite of constantly. So in my mind, I didn't really read the word. I didn't sound it out. I didn't look at the letters. I just knew I looked at it fast and saw, oh, thought it meant opposite, thought that that's what it stood for. So I knew that it was the opposite of constantly. So in my head, I put them together, and instead of reading the word as occasionally, as it should have been, I said, "Oh, constantly." And when I read it out, I said, "Oh, Mama, I have to stir this oh constantly." And she's looking at me. So that can happen. You're so excited to learn the new words. You're excited to be doing the thing. I was baking and I was all excited, and you get caught up in that excitement, or you get, as adults, you get caught up in the pressure to, I have to learn this quickly and I need to do well, or so many things are riding on my ability to do this that um, you just, your brain does funny things and you see it wrong and you misunderstand it. And so there you have it. I still struggle with that word today because it's just such an ingrained memory for me, that it's just a thing, and I still struggle when I look at the word and I just remember the incident and I giggle to myself and I move on and I stir occasionally. But so it's just, again, you just might have learned it wrong, or you might have just been so caught up in the whatever is going on, or the pressure, the whatever, your excitement. And so take your time with your words. Again, it goes back to speaking fast does not mean that you're fluent. Reading it fast doesn't get you anywhere either because you get the word wrong. So, and just there's two other examples I had here of words that people frequently say incorrectly, and it's an constantly kind of an example. One of them is, a lot of people will say frustrated instead of frustrated. So if you're learning from someone and they're teaching you how to pronounce frustrated, but they say frustrated, well, again, check your dictionary just to be sure. And then the other one is, a lot of people will say in English, when you have two sounds that are put together, like A and E, or AI, or AY, that's called a diphthong, diphthong, diphthong. So the PH sounds like an F. But many people, again, like my oh constantly example, will say diphthong. They'll just take out that PH. And so you're pronouncing it incorrectly. So you're learning the word wrong. So there's a thing. So that's why vocabulary journals are great, because you're looking them up, you're writing down the word, it's getting into your brain. They can be tedious. I have, where's mine? My vocabulary journal for my Korean. And I love this thing, you know. So I have certain rules and things here, and I've written down my goals and what have you, and I did really, really well with my, writing them down. But then I got to here, a couple of pages in, I got tired of it. So I've been doing flashcards, but still, it's good. I need to come back to here and I need to write down my words, because I'm finding that when I write them down and I write the definition, it's really helping me. Those are the words I remember on the flashcards. Um, and I'm not doing as well with the words that I didn't write down. So, um, it's really helpful to just expand your vocabulary, do a couple of words every day. It doesn't have to be this formal. I like to write them down, especially because it's a completely new way of thinking for me. It's a completely new um, system of symbols. It's not like my alphabet. My alphabet is the way, English speaking people, those are the symbols that we use to form words. Um, these are not like that for me. It's a completely different concept for me. So for me, writing it down works. But anyway, so just really double check your words. Any new words that someone teaches you, look it up in the dictionary at the very least, just to make sure that you're learning it correctly. And then finally, because we're coming up here, um, you could be misunderstanding what you're hearing. Again, you could be learning it from someone who has a heavy dialect. For me, I actually have, I think it's gotten a little worse in the past, I don't know, 15 years or so, but my accent, I technically should have a Boston accent, a heavy Boston accent. And many words I do, many things I do, but for the most part I don't. I have a pretty neutral English accent or American English accent. And so when I met one of my friends moved down to South Carolina, and she had a friend who had moved to South Carolina from deep in Alabama. So that's the southern states, North Carolina and Alabama, and they have a heavy southern accent. And I had never heard such a heavy accent as this woman from Alabama. And so there's a store, a department store called J.C. Penney, Penny. Well, the way she said it, she didn't say the first two initials. She said, because I said, oh, and how did you meet my friend? And she said, oh, we worked at Panties or whatever. I was at Panties. And it actually sounded like peony, the flower, the peony. And so I misunderstood it. But if I was, and we figured it out and it was funny. But if I was learning English and I didn't know the difference, I would be calling a penny, which is our 1 cent piece, I would be calling it a peony. So things like that. So again, just check out different sources, different resources when you're learning English. So these are just some brief areas I thought that people don't think about when you're learning English. And so, and you might find yourself struggling. And so these are some areas to think about. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So we are at our time. I want to keep it close. So um, I'm going to be doing this again at noon today. So at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. I'm coming live again. So if there's something that we went over now and you have questions, but where you come up with a question, then you can join us. We'll be right here. So I'm glad you could make it, and I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon. Okay, I will definitely see you next week, but see if you can join us at noon today, okay? All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.